Hello, everybody. It's time for dog culture vocabulary. Today's vocabulary words are bottom up and top down processing. So, understanding these can really help us understand what's going on in dog culture. So, there is something called top down processing, where you base your decisions on stuff you've already learned. And then, bottom up, that's where you get your top down processing. But with bottom up, it's more data driven and it's in real time. Like if you see something in your environment and you don't know what it is, say that you see a dog. You're going to see it running around, barking, pooping, pissing, biting, jumping on its owner, running into traffic. So you might form an opinion so that you can later on use your top down processing. One of an example I have, like little kids, when they are born into the family, there's a dog there, and the dog knocks them over, jumps on their bed, eats their food. The parents hooked a leash to the dog, and the little kid gets rammed into the drywall or crammed onto a concrete. And dogs will jump on top of kids and try to hump them and drag them around. And parents do that with their little kids. They let those dogs do that. But little kids are trying to develop their bottom up. They're trying to get that information so they can use top down processing later in life. But when you force those little kids to be around dogs, even though the dogs are hurting them, interrupting them, stealing attention away from them with their mom and dad, you're bypassing that bottom up processing. You're basically saying, look, dogs are better than you, dogs are better than people. You need to respect the dog. Go over here and start acting better because we have a dog. That's one example of how dog culture screws with the bottom up and top down processing.
These are top-down processing and bottom-up processing. Top-down processing is defined as the development of pattern recognition through the use of contextual information.
Okay, pattern recognition. It's like you experience something. Maybe you touched the wood stove and it was hot, and now you realize that that's not something to do anymore. But like with my example from the little kids, they interact with dogs and dogs hurt them and scare them. But then our society says, well, you just need to get over it. So we're screwing with that bottom up development of what a dog actually is.
When we utilize top-down processing, our ability to understand information is influenced by the context in which it appears. If I showed you these three letters, you could guess the entire word based on available information, as top-down processing uses previous experiences and expectations.
Yeah, experiences and expectations. But if we're hacking people's minds and what they're going through with dog ownership, we're telling them, well, look, you love the dog, your vet bill is high, your couch is ruined, grandma was bitten, the dog ran away and broke his leg. All of those experiences tell you something about dogs in order to get that later on top down processing. But we're not allowing humans to do that. We're not allowing them to form real expectations of dog ownership.
Top-down processing is the process of using contextual or general knowledge to understand what we actually perceive. Bottom-up processing is an explanation of the perception that involves starting with an incoming stimulus and
Okay, so now we're at bottom up processing. There's an incoming stimulus. So consider the incoming stimulus of a dog. If you never saw dogs before, if we weren't in such a dog worshipping society,
working upwards until the representation of the object is formed in our minds. Bottom-up processing is purely data-driven and requires no previous knowledge or learning. Also, the processing takes place in real time.
so no previous knowledge or learning. So if you encountered a dog and you were not propagandized that dogs are best friends, dogs are some type of cure for 10 different things, like they say, you might approach a dog and, like, kind of like I mentioned earlier, you're going to look at that thing and say, okay, that's a fanged predator. It's moving very fast. The way that it's looking at me, maybe it does look cute. Maybe it looks like a cute pupper, like they say. But also, if you have a proper functioning brain up in here, you know that looking cute isn't the right thing. So you're using data and real time information to process what a dog is so that later on you can use top down processing in the right way.
Time. So if you smell freshly baked chocolate chip cookies, then you will most likely get hungry. And if it's sunny outside, then you might want to take your sunglasses with you. Top down process.
Well, also, if you smell a nasty dog, you might go the other way. But remember, society says that no, that doesn't matter. And then the sunglasses example that he used right here, that's like if you're going somewhere where there's a lot of dogs, you better have a leash on your dog. You better have some mace or pepper spray because dogs attack your dogs. But people, they're so brainwashed by dogs, they will take their dogs off leash and attacks will happen. They will take their kids places where there's dogs and their kids will get killed and maimed. And so they're not using their proper bottom up, top down processing of the dog filled world that they live in.
Processing helps us to recognize patterns, and patterns are useful because they help us to simplify, understand, and know how to interact with the world. Bottom-up processing helps us to create an environment around us that triggers the right actions and improves our lives.
Yeah, trigger the right action and improve our lives. If we're not putting this bottom up processing, storing the information right based on our experiences with dogs, we can never change our environment. And this is so true. If you look out in the dog culture, all the attacks, all the bites, all the public fouling, all the noise, the attacks at dog parks on dogs, the environment of dog culture keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So we're not using our bottom up stuff properly. And then because of that, we can't use top down processing properly. We are using top down processing with dogs, which segues over to something else called top down control. So with top down control, you ignore all of the stuff in the environment that is dynamic and changing, and you just force yourself to act a certain way. So we're taking these humans and we're forcing them to pretend like these dogs are just the perfect, greatest thing. We're forcing them to ignore all the negative externalities of dog culture. And so this top-down processing that we're supposed to be using, it's been polluted by not doing the proper bottom-up recognition of our environment. And now come back and we're screwing around with the top-down processing again, turning it into top-down control, forcing ourselves to interact with dogs, even though we know that there's not necessarily safe to interact with dogs. I'll share another write-up about this type of processing. This contrasts with bottom-up processing. They're talking about top-down control. Relies more heavily on direct analysis of sensory data without relying on past experience or prior expectations. So past experience and prior expectations, that's all the brainwashing, that's all the propaganda that pushes dogs out there as some type of perfect everything. And so we're not doing that bottom up processing properly, which means by the time we get to the top down processing, all the previous and past experiences from dog culture, that's all the propaganda instead of actually looking at the nastiness that dogs bring to our life. So it says here that studies have demonstrated when given ambiguous stimulus, people are more likely to interpret it based on beliefs instead of objectivity in analyzing raw data. So the ambiguous stimulus is the presence of the dog. The dogs are constantly some type of stimulus or hyper awareness. And instead of looking at the dog and actually analyzing it, like, hey, this is an expense. Hey, this is bothering people around me. This barking, my neighbors have to hate this. Instead of analyzing it properly, we base it on emotion. So instead of taking the raw data and interpreting it, we base it on beliefs. Notice that they actually recognize this functioning in the brain with magnetic imaging. So this isn't just something that you can like control and change. Once you start doing this, it shows in your brain. It's affecting the way that your brain is working. It's affecting all of those neurons and electrical pathways in your brain, which means that the rest of your body is getting those signals too and deciding what part of your brain is to send blood to. So this is a huge effect on our society in general, not just with dog culture, because the habits of dog culture make us throw out this proper way of looking at our environment, the bottom up, the top down. And then because of that, we end up running around doing top down control, which is kind of another topic. But top down control is kind of like if you work in a company and the boss is just the boss. It doesn't matter what your profit is, it doesn't matter what your loss is, it doesn't matter if the new machinery that you bought for your company is failing. The boss says get to work and put a product out. And that's kind of like how dog culture is right now. It doesn't matter if that pet dander is nasty, it doesn't matter about the smell, it doesn't matter that veterinary suicide is on the rise. Just keep getting dogs, keep getting dogs. And that's the way dog culture is. It is a top down control culture. It expects you to blindly swallow all the preconceived notions of dog culture, which that's supposed to be your bottom up recognition. And then your top down control and your top down reasoning is completely hijacked. Another place that we find top down control is in tyrannical Marxist and communist governments. They say that they're going to control everything: private property, production, school, all of this type of stuff is top down control. It's not controlled by the market, it's not controlled by what type of people live in what type of area. Just look up Mao Zedong and other communist leaders. They wanted top down control. Like Mao Zedong, he made everybody kill those sparrows. That was top down control. Even though some people told him the sparrows ate the bugs and that was important for the crop. Nope, just do what I tell you. Top down control. So look at some of these communist manifestos and you'll see it's all about top down control. And when you are adopting dog culture, you will happily segue over to top down control because as a human, you have been forced to operate within this top down control type of mindset. And you've also been forced to throw out your bottom up recognition of things. So without your bottom up recognition of how nasty dog culture is, you're also going to easily be able to adopt these type of things. So that has been our vocabulary class on bottom up versus top down processing and a little bit of how that leads to top down control. Hope you guys like it, and I'll see you in the next one.